Right. July 8th, 2026. Donald Trump stands before 31 NATO leaders at the summit in Ankara, Turkey, and he says, I'm quoting directly, Iran is scum, cuckoo, a cancer. 3 words in front of the entire North Atlantic alliance. And within hours, every major news network on Earth locks into the same narrative. Iran attacked commercial ships. Iran violated the agreement. Iran is the aggressor. Iran started it. I need you to pause right there. Because the story you just heard, the one CNN is running, the BBC is running, Al Jazeera is running, that story is exactly what someone very powerful wants you to believe. And today, I'm going to walk you through 3 things almost nobody is talking about. First, Trump didn't break the Memorandum of Understanding because Iran attacked ships. He broke it because he needed Iran to attack ships. He engineered that reason from day one. Second, while the US and Iran are busy exchanging fire, there's a third party, not Israel, not Saudi Arabia, not China, sitting quietly in the background, counting money. And that party hasn't fired a single bullet into the Middle East. Not one. Third, even if America wins this war, even if they bomb Iran back to the Stone Age, even if they sink every IRGC vessel in the Persian Gulf, they will never, and I mean never, actually control the Strait of Hormuz. Not because of Iran's military strength, but because of something far more structural, far more permanent. Let's break this down. Before I show you the evidence, I need to give you a framework, a mental model. Without this, the events of July 8th look random. They look like chaos. But they are not chaos, not even close. I call this framework the exit trap. The concept is simple once you see it. Imagine you sign a lease on an apartment, but you didn't really want to sign it. You were pressured into it, maybe by family, business partners, or political allies who said, we need to show the world we can negotiate, so you sign. But the moment the ink dries, you want out. The problem is, if you just walk away, if you unilaterally cancel the lease, you pay penalties. Worse, you look like the bad guy, the one who broke their word. So what do? You make the landlord violate the lease first. You leave noise complaints unaddressed. You let small rule infractions slide, not because you don't notice them, but because you're waiting. You're accumulating. Then, at the right moment, you set up a situation where the other side has to respond, where they have to push back, where they give you legal and moral cover to say, they broke the deal, not me, and you walk away clean. That's the exit trap. Hold that concept in your mind for the next few minutes, because every piece of evidence I'm about to show you fits this model perfectly. June 17th, 2026. The MOU between the US and Iran is signed. 14 points, a 60-day negotiation window, oil export licenses for Iran, Hormuz passage protocols, the whole package. On that same day, Trump steps to the microphone and says, again, I'm quoting, "If I don't like what I see, we'll bomb immediately." Think about what that means. You don't say that at a signing ceremony unless you're signaling something. Not to Iran, not to diplomats in the room, but to your own domestic base. You're saying, I signed this, but I'm not committed. I'm already looking for the exit. You might say that's just Trump being Trump. Tough talk, posturing. Fair enough. But let's look at what happened next. The MOU gives both sides 60 days to sit down, talk, work through disputes, use established communication channels before either side can escalate militarily. 60 days, 2 full months, an eternity in geopolitics. Here's my question, and I want you to really sit with it. In those 60 days, across all 14 points of the MOU, how many times did the American side reach out through the official diplomatic channel to raise concerns, flag a problem, or say, hey, we think you're not complying with Article 5. Let's talk about it. 0. Not a few times, 0. Instead of using that window for diplomacy, the US set up what's been called the Oman route, a shipping lane that put commercial vessels directly into waters Iran had already designated under the MOU as their Hormuz oversight zone. Waters where Iran specifically warned that unauthorized passage would be considered a provocation. So to be clear, America had a 60-day diplomatic window. They used 0 days for diplomacy. Instead, they sailed ships into exactly the waters Iran said not to sail into, without using the notification channel the MOU had established for that purpose. Does that sound like a party that wants the deal to succeed? Or does it sound like a party setting up a situation? July 8th. The US launches over 80 airstrikes against targets in southern Iran. Why July 8th? Why not July 1st when the 60-day window was closing? Why not a week earlier or later? Because on July 8th, Trump was standing at the NATO summit in Ankara in front of 31 allied heads of state. Think about that staging. He drops bombs on Iran while standing before the entire alliance. The message is unmistakable. You need us. We are the only ones willing to act. Europe, Japan, South Korea, you all need America. So stop complaining about trade tariffs and NATO spending. Look what we just did. This is not military strategy. It's political theater at the highest level. The bombing was the backdrop for a performance at NATO. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe the timing was coincidence. But in 40 years of studying geopolitics, when I see military action timed to the hour of a major multilateral summit, I don't call that coincidence. I call it a production. Now let's get to the mechanism, the actual legal trap. On July 8th, same day as the airstrikes, the US revokes General License X. That's the document that allowed Iran to legally export oil during the MOU negotiation period. It was written into the deal as Article 10. Iran said, "We'll negotiate in good faith, but we need economic relief while we talk." The US agreed, in writing. Trump revoked it on July 8th, the same day as the bombs. Here's where it gets really interesting. When Iran responds, when they say, "You violated Article 10, we have the right to defend ourselves," America says, "No, you attacked commercial ships first. You broke the deal." Iran says, "No, you pulled the oil license first. You violated Article 10. We were responding." And the entire world argues about who did what first, because both actions happened within hours of each other on the same day. Do you see what happened? The sequence was engineered to be ambiguous. When both sides can claim the other acted first, there is no clean narrative, only chaos. And in that chaos, the party with better PR wins the story. America has much better PR than Iran. That is the exit trap closing. Then there's the final number, the one that tells you how precisely this was calculated. At the moment General License X was revoked, there were 63 million barrels of Iranian crude oil sitting in tankers around the world, in transit, waiting to be delivered. At market prices on July 8th, that's roughly $5 billion. All of it frozen instantly with one signature. Not seized, not destroyed, just frozen, inaccessible to Iran. $5 billion gone in a day, not because of bombs, but because of paperwork. And you wonder why Iran launched strikes on 85 American military sites across Bahrain and Kuwait that night? You wonder why they shot down an MQ-9 Reaper drone. They were furious. And that fury, completely predictable, is exactly what the exit trap was designed to produce. I have to stop here because I do something in every lecture that I think is non-negotiable. I present the strongest possible case for the side I'm arguing against. Not a straw man, the actual strongest version. Because if I can't address that, I'm not doing analysis. I'm just doing advocacy. So here's the strongest argument that Iran is guilty, that Iran broke the deal, that Iran is the aggressor. Iran attacked at least 3 commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz before the American airstrikes. That's not disputed. AIS data, the GPS equivalent for ships, shows those vessels going dark in Iranian-controlled waters. Shipping companies have confirmed damage. Lloyd's of London has invoked war risk clauses. The attacks happened. Iran did it. That argument is strong, real. I'm not dismissing it. But before you accept it as definitive, ask yourself these questions. Why were those ships there? Why did the US route commercial vessels through waters Iran had flagged as disputed? Why did no American diplomat pick up the phone in 60 days to say, "We've got ships coming through, let's align on protocol"? Why was General License X revoked at the same moment as the bombing, not a week earlier or later, which would have created a cleaner sequence? The strongest counter-argument to my thesis is that Iran attacked commercial ships. That's true. But it doesn't answer those 4 questions. And until you can answer them, you cannot close the case. Let me be honest, this is my interpretation. I could be wrong. But in political science, we have the principle of parsimony, Occam's razor. The simplest explanation that accounts for all the evidence is usually right. And the simplest explanation for zero diplomatic contact, ships in disputed waters, simultaneous bombing and oil license revocation, and military action timed to a NATO summit is not a series of coincidences. It's a plan. Now let's move to part 2 because this is where it gets truly interesting. While every camera was pointed at the Persian Gulf on July 8th, while every journalist wrote about Hormuz, IRGC strikes, MQ-9s, and oil prices, where was Vladimir Putin? What was he doing? At 1:19 a.m. Moscow time, Russia launched its third ballistic missile strike of the week against Kyiv and Kharkiv. 54 missiles. Ukraine intercepted 4 out of 54. Why was the interception rate so catastrophically low? Ukraine has Patriot systems. They've been defending against Russian missiles for years and have gotten good at it. The answer? A significant portion of the Patriot interceptor stockpile, the actual ammunition, had been quietly redirected toward the Middle East theater in the weeks prior. The US and its allies have finite stocks of high-end interceptors. When you need them in one place, you pull them from somewhere else. Putin knew this. It wasn't a guess. It was calculated. He hit Ukraine hardest at the exact moment American air defense capacity was most strained. He didn't need better missiles. He just needed to wait for the right distraction. The Middle East crisis handed him that perfectly. But okay, you might say Putin opportunistically attacks Ukraine anyway. What's the big deal? Here's the big deal. Brent crude oil prices increased by 6% on July 8th, from about $73 to $78 a barrel, in one trading day. Russia exports roughly 7 million barrels of oil per day, a conservative estimate given their shadow fleet operations through the Caspian and Central Asia. 7 million barrels times $4 to $5 of additional revenue per barrel every single day. You can do the math. It's not a small number. And Putin earned every dollar without deploying a single asset in the Middle East. Not a ship, not a drone, not a soldier, not a ruble spent on Hormuz. He just waited. There's a deeper layer here, and this is where it goes from interesting to genuinely alarming. Russia and Iran have a standing intelligence sharing agreement, documented, covering satellite targeting data, electronic intelligence, real-time battlefield coordination. When Iran struck those 85 American military sites and shot down that MQ-9, those operations required precise targeting data. Data that Iran, under severe surveillance restrictions, doesn't generate entirely on its own. Russia provides that data. So here's the full picture. On July 8th, Russia provides Iran with targeting intelligence. Iran uses it to strike American assets in the Gulf. America pours more military resources into the Middle East, drawing them away from Europe. Russia then attacks Ukraine with maximum force at minimum interception. Simultaneously, Russian oil revenue spikes because the war they helped engineer has pushed prices 6% higher. One country, 4 outcomes, 0 direct military action in the Middle East. That is not opportunism, that is architecture. There's a name for this architecture, the CRINC model: China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. The theory, now an observable pattern, is that these 4 actors coordinate to create simultaneous pressure on American strategic bandwidth across multiple theaters: Ukraine, Hormuz, the Taiwan Strait, the Korean Peninsula. 4 theaters, 1 superpower, finite resources. The CRINC model doesn't need any of these countries to win a direct war with America. It just needs America fighting in enough places at once that it can't win any decisively. Military planners have a phrase for this: you don't defeat the enemy, you exhaust them. And right now, that strategy is working. Now, I want to level with you directly, because there's a fantasy circulating in certain American policy circles. The fantasy is that if America applies enough military pressure, it can achieve what strategists call Hormuz dominance, the ability to open or close the strait at will, projecting absolute control over the 21% of global oil supply that passes through those waters. It's a compelling fantasy. America has the most powerful navy in human history, more carrier strike groups than the next 10 navies combined. On paper, controlling a 33-kilometer waterway seems achievable. But let me give you 3 structural, permanent reasons why Hormuz dominance is a fantasy, not just a difficult goal. First, the navigable shipping lane through the Strait of Hormuz is about 3 kilometers wide in each direction, less than 2 miles. You don't need a navy to shut that down, you need mines. Modern naval mines are extraordinarily sophisticated. Magnetic, acoustic, pressure sensors. They can be programmed to activate after a certain number of vessels pass, letting the first few through to avoid detection. Iran has been producing and stockpiling advanced mines for decades. Their Mosaic defense doctrine specifically incorporates mine warfare as a denial strategy. The U.S. Navy's mine countermeasure capability is one of its weakest areas. Pentagon auditors have said so repeatedly. Clearing a minefield in a contested 3-kilometer lane under fire against a motivated adversary on home territory is not a days-long operation. It's weeks to months. Every day those mines are in the water, the global oil market is disrupted, prices spike, economies take damage. America might eventually clear them, but the economic damage would be done long before clearing is complete. Second, the Mosaic defense doctrine. Iran has divided its military command structure across all 31 provinces, each with independent command authority, independent weapon stockpiles, independent communication networks, and critically, independent authority to act. Even if Tehran is destroyed, even if central command is severed, even if the supreme leader is dead, there is no central node to strike, no headquarters that, if destroyed, stops the Iranian military from functioning. The architecture was specifically designed so that decapitation, the American military's preferred approach, is ineffective. Does that remind you of anything? It should. Iraq, 2003. America destroyed Saddam's military in 21 days, the fastest major military victory in modern history. Then they spent 20 years fighting a decentralized insurgency with no headquarters, no uniform, no chain of command. Iran watched Iraq and built an entire national defense doctrine around that lesson. They looked at what happens when you have a centralized military against the American war machine and said, "We will never fight that way. We will fight distributed, cellular, so that every village, every province, every unit can fight independently, indefinitely." You cannot occupy a country organized this way. You can bomb it, cause incredible damage, but you cannot achieve strategic control, because control requires someone to surrender. In a Mosaic defense, there is no single entity that can surrender on behalf of the whole. Third, and this is the one almost nobody is discussing, the reason Hormuz dominance is not just militarily difficult, but geopolitically obsolete. In May 2025, a full year before this war began, China completed the Iran-China Railway, a land-based rail corridor connecting Iranian oil fields to the Chinese market through Central Asia. No ships, no Hormuz, no American naval power relevant. That railway was completed a full year before the first bomb fell on Iran. You don't build a billion-dollar railway through some of the world's most difficult terrain by accident. You build it because you are anticipating a scenario where Hormuz is not reliable. China spent years and enormous resources building its insurance policy against exactly the crisis we're seeing now. In the Caspian Sea, Russia and Iran operate what analysts call the shadow fleet, vessels that move oil and weapons through routes American surveillance cannot easily monitor, using flags of convenience, transponder manipulation, and routing through third-country ports. This fleet has grown substantially since Western sanctions intensified after 2022. So the picture is this. Iran has a railway to China for land exports. Iran has a shadow fleet with Russia for Caspian exports. Iran's oil can reach its primary customer without a single tanker going anywhere near Hormuz. But wait, there's one more piece, and it's the most ironic. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, America's closest Gulf allies, have been quietly building pipeline infrastructure to route oil exports to the Red Sea, bypassing Hormuz entirely. Saudi Arabia's East-West pipeline, the UAE's Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, both bypass Hormuz. America's own allies are building infrastructure that renders Hormuz control irrelevant to them. If even Saudi Arabia and the UAE are hedging against a future where Hormuz is contested, a future they are building toward right now, then the strategic premise of American Hormuz dominance is not just wrong, it's something America's own partners don't believe in. The world is building around Hormuz, not because Iran is winning, but because rational actors plan for multiple futures, and the future where Hormuz is reliably open is looking less and less reliable. Let me bring this all together. I want to make sure we're clear on the three core arguments before I give you the homework and the final question. Argument 1. Trump's exit from the MOU was not a reaction to Iranian aggression. It was a choreographed exit from a deal he never intended to honor, executed through the exit trap. The zero diplomatic contact, the Oman provocations, the simultaneous oil license revocation and bombing all point to a plan, not a reaction. Argument 2. The primary beneficiary of the July 8th crisis is not Israel, not Saudi Arabia, it's Russia. Oil revenue up 6%. Ukraine exposure reduced as American air defense assets shift east. Intelligence support to Iran yielding American military attrition in the Gulf. Strategic overload on American bandwidth across 4 simultaneous theaters. Russia spent nothing on this outcome. They just positioned themselves and waited. Argument 3. Even if America achieves total military dominance over Iran, which is not happening, Hormuz control is structurally impossible. Mine warfare creates weeks-long disruption windows. Mosaic defense means no central authority to defeat. And China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE have all built or are building bypass infrastructure that makes Hormuz a sideshow to the real energy geopolitics of the 2030s. Now, 3 things to watch in the next 72 hours. First, what does Moscow say about Hormuz? Or more precisely, what does Moscow not say? Watch Russian foreign ministry statements and Putin's press conferences. If Russia stays conspicuously silent while escalating in Ukraine, that silence is a strategic choice. Silence that benefits you is a form of action. Second, what does Iran do with those 63 million frozen barrels? If Iran attempts to route that oil through the China railway, if they move toward a non-maritime, non-dollar transaction with Beijing, that signals they are settling in for a long conflict, not positioning for a negotiated settlement. Watch the tanker data, watch China's import data. That 63 million barrels tells you everything about Iranian strategic intent. Third, watch Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, widely understood to be architects of the original MOU. They negotiated it, believed in it. If Trump has just blown up their deal, and the evidence suggests he has, what does that mean for internal coherence of American foreign policy? A president who destroys his own negotiators' work doesn't just lose a deal, he loses the next deal too, because nobody on the other side of the table will believe that signing an agreement with America means anything. This week's homework. Find the original text of the MOU signed June 17, 2026. Read Article 5 and Article 10 in full. Focus on who holds definitional authority, who gets to define what constitutes Hormuz control under Article 5, who gets to define what constitutes a violation under Article 10. When you read those articles carefully, when you look at the actual legal language, you will understand why both sides can simultaneously claim the other is wrong, because the document was written to be ambiguous. Whether that ambiguity was intentional is a question I'll leave for a future lecture. And now the final question, the one I want sitting in the back of your mind tonight. On July 8, 2026, Donald Trump stood before 31 heads of state at the NATO summit in Ankara and declared the Iran MOU over. He called Iran scum, cuckoo, a cancer, in front of the cameras of the world. And that same night, Vladimir Putin fired 54 ballistic missiles into Ukraine. He said nothing about Hormuz, nothing about Iran, nothing about the oil price spike. He just fired missiles into Ukraine, collected the revenue, shared the satellite data, and waited. The question is not who is right or wrong between America and Iran. The question is, why did Putin say nothing about Hormuz, nothing at all, while launching the largest ballistic missile attack on Ukraine in 3 weeks, on the same night, at the same hour, when the most powerful nation on earth is screaming about Iran, and the second most powerful is completely silent about the very crisis that is making them billions? That silence is not neutral. That silence is a strategy, and understanding that strategy tells you more about where this is going than anything Trump or Iran will announce. Think about that.